Welcome back, insiders. As you may know, Stripe recently came out with its annual report of 2024, and there's some gold nuggets in there that I think you're not going to want to miss. So whether you're managing or investing in e-commerce, SaaS, dabbling with drop shipping, this video is for you, and we're going to be discussing several topics here that are in the report. First of all, internal Stripe growth developments. We're going to be talking about small business and enterprise e-commerce trends, as well as startup trends, issues with online payments and how Stripe resolves them, and trending sectors, which I kind of felt like was a little bit of green feel good, but it is in the report nonetheless, so I do want to talk about that. First of all, let me get my head out of the way, and boom, there it is. The Stripe annual report came out March 13th, 2024. Now, they talk about, or they open up with a little Charlie Munger mention here, where he described two-part rule that works wonders in business, science, and elsewhere. First, this is take a simple idea and then take it very seriously. Now, Stripe's simple idea is grow the GDP of the internet. Now, this is important. It's a recurring theme, and they're going to talk about it several times, so keep that in mind. But to grow the GDP of the internet. Very simple idea, pretty big idea though. Now, Stripe launched in 2011, 13 years ago. So in this time, the internet has more than doubled its users, and they think it's still early. Let's talk about the internal Stripe growth developments, or what's happening in Stripe. So Stripe passed, and this is pretty crazy, the milestone of 1 trillion total payments volume in 2023, up 25% prior year. That's crazy. If I was an investor, I would be super stoked if I saw that 25% growth year over year. That is nice, especially for a company this size. Now, this is crazy as well. US e-commerce, an imperfect but useful comparison, grew 7.6% last year. So that they're beating that benchmark by like 4 or 5x, which is pretty nice. 4x, not 5x. At 1 trillion, the output of business that run on Stripe sums to roughly 1% of global GDP. That is insane. So coming back here, Stripe's mission to grow GDP of the internet, they're doing a pretty good job at that. They're taking it very seriously, it looks like. That's crazy. Now, it is a private company, so you can't invest in Stripe. You could always invest in competitors or downstream companies maybe using Stripe that benefit from Stripe. If you're interested in that, we can make a video on maybe some comparisons or some of those companies to invest in. We're not going to talk about it in this video. Leave a comment below if you're interested. Now, what I do like about private companies is the fact that they can have that long 10-year horizon. Think about SpaceX. If SpaceX had quarterly reports in terms of we got to please our shareholders every quarter, I don't think they would make it to Mars. And that's kind of what Stripe is talking about. They're a private company. They can really focus on that long-term horizon. And a lot of that comes down to conversion optimization, where they give a comparison between physical businesses where somebody might go to a restaurant and then eat and they enjoy it and then they pay later, right? It's not so much about the payment experience. It could be god-awful payment experience, but they're going to pay nonetheless. Now with online checkout, it's basically the exact opposite. You always pay first. You typically pay first. I mean, there's some freemium platforms, but if the payment is not good, that's a problem. They say around 70% of online shopping carts are abandoned, which is pretty rough, and it kind of makes sense. Now, they say this number is insanely high, and some of those people just may not actually want to purchase it, but nonetheless, this number is really, really high. So they want to improve that at all costs. And to do that, they are focusing on a few things. So I'll quickly go over these because this is not so much focused on trends, but it is in a way some trends because here's what some big companies are actually doing. So X.com, you guys know that, Twitter, ChatGPT, obviously OpenAI, Slack, another big B2B business. They're all using their pre-built payment surfaces, which is this really nice interface. You'll know if you upgraded your Twitter account or something like that. You actually go over to Stripe, and then Stripe manages everything. It's really, really nice. I use it myself for some of my SaaS platforms because it just saves a ton of time. We'll talk about some of those ways it saves a ton of time for the consumer and the developer, I guess you can say as well. So the full stack tech stack, and then the customer actually paying on it. Slack, for example, saw a conversion uplift of more than 3% just by upgrading to these optimized UIs. It also saves Slack a lot of time because they don't have to worry about building that in-house solution. We used to have always in-house solutions. So you go to our SaaS platform and then you try to check out, and then it would look like everything was on our website. You never left our website. It had a real in-house feel, but there was probably always something missing. We'll talk about some of those things. Now, what is typically missing? Well, different payment options. Maybe some countries require a phone SMS verification or something like that. So it's hard to account for all these different things, especially when you're thinking international. And that's what Stripe does super, super well. And they invest all their energy in improving this conversion flow, which is pretty nice. They also worry about new payment methods. For example, 2/3 of Cash App's pays active users are millennial or Gen Z. Now, Cash App, that's something I would probably never integrate in my checkout, but they have it. So this just unlocks a whole new demographic, or makes it a lot easier to reach that demographic. Or in Sweden, they have this new app called Swish that everyone uses, by 8 million customers in Sweden. So that's pretty insane. So if you're not offering Swish, you're missing out on huge demographics. And that's just one of those turnkey solutions that if you use their pre-built pages. These are, in a way, kind of the same dot, but this is like a subcategory almost. Payment links, no code links. These are really fast too. And this year, this is really important. They shaved off 300 milliseconds of payment links rendering time. I can't emphasize how important this is enough. So I took a little bit of a stat here that I found. More than 10 years ago, Amazon found that every 100 milliseconds of latency cost them 1% in sales. I mean, think about that on the bottom line, or think about that with the 1% of global GDP, right? That's a huge amount. So 300 milliseconds makes a huge difference, right? In 2006, Google found an extra 0.5 seconds in search page generation time dropped traffic by 20%. So they had the same situation. People are waiting for Google to load, and they're just like, I'm bored, and they just leave, even if it takes, a couple of milliseconds, right? So it's not like a lot of waiting time. It makes a huge, huge difference. So people just want to go really quickly. Now, for small businesses and trends, they talked to here about, kind of gave an example business of why you would use Stripe. This is definitely a good read if you're wondering about using Stripe. And I'll summarize it really quickly because this is just one long example. But ultimately, even if you're a company using a really simple solution like, $50 a month pricing plan or something like that, billing, especially international billing, is a complex issue, right? You got proration, you got potentially multiple plans and people upgrading, downgrading, all that stuff. You got taxes, currencies, multi-platform. So you don't know what payment platform someone's going to be on. Are they going to be on mobile? Are they going to be on Chrome? Are they going to be on Safari? Or literally countless other ones. That Stripe is already done. Turnkey for all those, right? Stripe is all-in-one solution. And fraud detection is massive. Oh my God, we had one problem where we had so many Russian users just using fake credit cards and then always requesting like free credits or something else, getting their money in a different way, and it just blows your payment processing up. Stripe handles all that, so you never know like what nifty ways people are trying to come up to scam you. So a lot about like internal Stripe growth developments and how small businesses use it. Pretty helpful if you don't know much about Stripe, but that's kind of their answer to kind of like tooting their own horn here a little bit. Now, enterprise transformation and enterprise e-commerce trends. This gets a little bit more interesting. Now, I've noticed that, or what they talk about here is more than 100 companies now processing more than 1 billion per year with Stripe. That's really nice. Here are the patterns they have identified. First of all, marketplace with Stripe Connect. So you have companies like Zara, pre-owned, who noticed that a lot of their clothes was on pre-owned clothing websites. So they basically made their own pre-owned clothing website, but instead of having to figure out the whole marketplace, the whole billing and all that stuff, they just use Stripe Connect, which I've actually used myself. Really, really nice. So you can see that companies are maybe looking for that sustainable approach, marketplace, secondhand, and boom, just switching right over to that. Now, there might be some business ideas there for sure if somebody is thinking about that space. So a lot of legacy companies are noticing that's a bit of a trend, and that's where they're going to secondhand and using marketplaces from Stripe to solve it. Outsourcing checkout, again, here they talk about why companies use that new checkout page. This time specifically, they talk about legacy. So let me zoom in a little bit more here. legacy in terms of their tech stack might be really old, so building more checkout and integrations for checkout is really complex. So just boom, here's a link, goes right to the checkout page. Everything's thought about, really simple. And yeah, I agree for sure. Point of S systems, integration apps like Eventbrite. You guys probably know Eventbrite, and this is point of sales, POS. Is basically if you're at a farmer's market or a flea market or you're in an event and you need to buy something or you're trying to sell something, boom, it's right there on your app. So they address that issue as well. That's a big trend where these companies are going to apps. And then legacy industries creating apps and subscriptions. Something like Fox Sport, now they have an app and you can use Stripe checkout. So those are some trends for enterprise. Now this is really interesting. We talked about small business trends, enterprise e-commerce trends. Here's this startup trend that I found really interesting. Now I knew most of it, right? I knew the fact that VC funding has been going down. It's talked about a lot, especially on podcasts like the All In Pod, but startups going live on Stripe is actually increasing quite significantly here. And my thoughts was right away, AI-enabled solo entrepreneurship is interesting again, because if you've ever done solo entrepreneurship, it sucks. You got to wear a lot of hats, and it's exhausting. But now with AI, it's like sitting next to a professional coder, professional marketer, and everything just becomes kind of possible again. It's way less overwhelming. So that's where I thought the curve was coming from. And they did mention that, but they also mentioned a few other things. First of all, profitability. This is crazy. So startups funded in 2022, the most recent year where we have a full year of analyzable data, are 60% more likely to start collecting revenue within the first year and 57% more likely to process 1 million within the first year than those funded in 2019. So these companies, since they're not getting funding, they need to get that money from somewhere. So they're like, let's start selling some stuff, because everyone knows the famous story about Snapchat, right? Where they were like on year 6 or something, and they still haven't made 1 cent of revenue. And that's because a lot of these companies had so much funding. And the second they started selling something, it would show that this is not a profitable company. And then, all of a sudden it's way harder to raise capital instead of, having this potential of what it could be, right? So a lot of companies are waking up, you got to make money, and they noticed that was a big increase of reasons why people are actually starting to make more money on Stripe. The second thing, simplicity, online service. They offer something called Stripe Atlas, which allows you to set up a business. In this case, it's a Delaware company. You get all your tax ID and all that fun stuff from the IRS, and there's a $100 maintenance cost. Yeah, I get it. I would probably use it if I was totally new. Now, I set up my business in Florida, several businesses in Florida, and it's like $150 to set it up / per year. So it's actually pretty competitively priced because you probably know you're not missing anything. So I think that's probably pretty good. Now, here things get a little bit more interesting again, and we're diving into topic number 4, issues with online payments, as we're talking about now, and how Stripe solves them. So before, our net assessment is that startup ecosystem is more vibrant than ever before. So that is a very big green check mark. How we engineer for reliability, I found some things here super impressive. So let's go and scroll down. Now here's some things. Now I've been working for myself my whole life. I've had one real job, and that was I was at an auction house when I was in high school, and I would help out at this auction house. And ever since then, I've been coding and doing things for myself. And from all the SaaSes I've created, before we use Stripe, man, we used some shady options out there that just had endless issues. For me, multiple payment providers to make sure you have reliability was always a big one. Making sure you offer as many cards as possible. I mean, it was exhausting, right? You'd spend more time on your checkout page than anything. So being able to outsource this is just insane. And Stripe really focuses on the fact that they don't have downtime. I feel like this is a giant Stripe promotion video at this point. Oh boy. Well, at least we're talking about trends. Anyway, Stripe solves a lot of that, and they are barely ever down. They talk about a really robust system here, and this is something you guys should maybe consider about your SaaS or e-commerce site. I know I keep trying to improve my pipeline to go from development into a live site, and this is crazy. Okay, so first of all, their largest 4-day period right here, where they were talking about Cyber Monday. This is crazy. So they have 1.4 million tests that check if code before deployment. Stripe uses 500,000 CPU cores. This is crazy. to execute more than 6 billion test runs each day. So just think about a huge like server farm at this point just for testing. And then they do gradual rollout, right? They make sure that one at a time. Okay, first 0.5% of our users get it, then 1%, and 5%, 20%, so on. And before then, you even have like mock environments and test environments. So they really make sure that they slowly deliver that. And I think that's really great. We do that as well for our SaaS sites, but not even remotely as significant as these guys do, which is just insane. I mean, it's also a massive company. But I like that. So many stages they have here. So let's keep going. That's how Stripe solves a lot of their issues, right? Their deployment phase is just really, really well structured. And this is kind of crazy here. So to illustrate, let's look at the most significant recent issue, which happened in February 2024, February 8th. And right here, they had Stripe go down for a little bit of time, very, very small amount of time, actually. It looks like 6 minutes. And here we go. Users had 39, 15, and 12 payments fail respectively. That's tiny for this size company. I mean, that is like nothing. That was mind-blowing to me. Let's keep going here because we have one more important thing we want to discuss, and that's trending sectors. And this is where I felt like some of these things were a little bit green, feel good. First of all, clean energy, carbon removal. Here's a cool stat, 444 gigawatts of solar energy last year, which is greater than all nuclear grid capacity in the world today. So wow, solar is booming, guys. And there is a lot of work in carbon neutral things, tech as well. They were talking here a lot about the exponential curve. So better tech leads to more development, leads to more tech research, etc. So that's where you're seeing with batteries, solar, and all that stuff. So that's why it's getting better and better. Solar cost right here, production costs, and just constantly going down. That's why it's easier to do even more with it, and then more research comes into it. So it's just like this never-ending loop. They also talk about some trends internally where these companies use buy now, pay later systems, which integrate super well with Stripe. You can have third parties in there, and then people can get these more expensive solar home solutions at $0 upfront investment, which I think is probably pretty good. Buy now, pay later. It's not always the worst. Now, if there's like 0% interest, sometimes it's actually crazy not to do it. Maybe out of pure personal financial reasons, you don't want to do it, but actually sometimes buy now, pay later is pretty good if you know how to manage your finances. If you don't, I would just avoid it totally to begin with. Robotics, they just give tons of examples how robotics are making things more efficient, and that's a huge boost in trends. Here's a bartender robot. Farming they talk about, and in farming it kind of goes a little bit the same way. A lot of tech coming into farming, especially with vertical farming. Now, here's a fancy title, The Abundance of Beauty. Basically, it's AI and robotic reduction in price in legacy industries. So you'll have something like, marble cutting where it's just typed into the computer. You have AI for like Midjourney for AI images, so on and so forth. So nothing too crazy there. But yeah, so the trending sectors kind of feels a little bit like feel-goody. I think we know all these things, and it might be like a little bit tricky to have like an action plan regarding them unless you figure out how to use. I think the easiest thing to do, honestly, is like figure out how to use AI in your legacy business, and you're just going to be more efficient and have a lot lower cost base than your competitor, and you're going to be able to put that into marketing and beat your competitor. So AI is massive. That's really the big trend right now. Figure out, I would say, how to use AI in your industry, and that's where a lot of beauty and magic happens. That's for sure. Thanks for tuning in, dropping a like. I'll see you next time.